Good afternoon. I have to say, it is great to be in a room full of professionals. And I mean that honestly. 2 weeks ago, my sister works for me, and she handles a lot of these engagements that I do, and she has a hard time saying no. So she booked me to speak at Purdue University for the Delta Gamma sorority. I actually thought it was pretty cool. I thought I'm going to go back to a college town. It's going to be neat. I figured I'd be the big man on campus. So I recruited a couple of my buddies to come with me, and it wasn't a hard sell. They were on board. So we put our suits on, and we're about to walk out the door. We're heading to the plane, and my wife stops. My wife starts laughing. And she said, they're going to think you're there for Parents' Weekend, guys. She was actually right. Because when I got there, I was doing a little meet and greet before I went on, and this young lady came up to me, and she was all excited, and she said, God, I loved watching you on that first season of The Apprentice, and I watched your wife, Juliana, and when I watched that Apprentice, I was in 7th grade. I felt really old really fast. But it got me to thinking that first season of The Apprentice was almost 9 years ago, believe it or not. And I'm just curious, how many people in the room have ever seen at least one episode of The Apprentice? Okay. Whew. It's always a good thing when I come to these events. And for me, it's been a great 9 years because I've gotten to travel to different parts of the world and all over the U.S., and I've met so many different people. And everywhere I go, people will stop me, and they'll ask me the same two questions. Doesn't matter where I'm at. And the first question they always ask is Donald Trump's hair real? Of course, I have to say that it is. But the second question they want to know is, a little late on the uptake there. I've been in a helicopter with him. That is real. But the second question they always want to know is if I knew I was going to win that business competition show when I first started. And I have to be honest with them, I had no idea. I was competing with 15 other contestants. We had all these guys from these fancy business schools, Harvard and Yale, and all these fancy pedigrees. I was a sales and marketing guy from Chicago. And I tell them I didn't know where I was going to stack up in the mix. But I go on to let them know that if they were to ask my mom claims she knew I was going to win The Apprentice when I was 10 years old. When I was 10 years old, my mom knew that I was a born salesman. And it all began on my parents' anniversary weekend. See, my mom and dad were going to go out of town to celebrate their big wedding anniversary, and they wanted to have some quality time alone. So they decided they were going to ship me off to my grandmother's for the weekend. And I wasn't happy about it, but I went. And I woke up Saturday morning, and my grandmother was in the kitchen making breakfast. And I was a very inquisitive kid, probably like many of you. I would always ask a million questions. So I started inundating my grandmother with all these questions. What goes here? How does this work? Why are you doing that? So she decided she was going to pull me in the kitchen, and she was going to teach me how to cook. I spent 6 hours that day in the kitchen mastering the art of making the pancake. I could make blueberry pancakes, banana pancakes, you name it, I could make it. So Sunday morning, I popped out of bed and I raced into that kitchen, and the first thing I did is I picked up the telephone and I invited all the old ladies from my grandmother's block to come over for a pancake breakfast. Oh, they loved it. I made them their pancakes, they were pinching my cheeks, they thought it was the neatest thing they'd ever seen. But when they left, I made a very interesting discovery. See, when they left, I started clearing their plates away from the table, and I discovered that each and every one of those ladies left a $5 bill underneath her plate. I thought, I'm onto something here. So I did what I thought was normal, what any other 10-year-old kid would do. I took that money, I put it in my pocket, and I kept my mouth shut. Went back home, I didn't say a word to anybody. And the week went by, and Friday afternoon, that school bus dropped me off in front of my parents' house, and I went blazing in the front door, demanding that my parents take me to my grandmother's for the weekend. Well, this went on for the next 5 weekends, and my mom could not understand this new relationship that I had formed with my grandmother, or I should say partnership, probably. And then my mom was in my room one day, and she was putting something in one of my drawers, and she made a rather interesting discovery of her own. She found a stack of $5 bills hidden underneath my socks, and she flipped out. Immediately panicked, she sat me down as any good mother would, and she demanded to know where all this money had come from. And I had to fess up that I was running a makeshift restaurant out of my grandmother's house. my mom put that business to an end immediately. But when I look back on that experience, whether I knew it or not at the age of 10, I possessed a trait that was so important in everything that I've done from that point on. It was very important and instrumental in me winning that coveted spot with The Apprentice. And it was having the ability to recognize an opportunity, but more importantly, seizing that opportunity. Most of us go through life and we see opportunity all around us, on our way into work, on our trip down here, but it's the very few, it's the 1%ers that actually reach out, grab a hold of it, and do something with it. And that was my start to becoming Trump's right-hand man. It began with the pancakes in my grandmother's kitchen. And just to give you a little background, I grew up in Chicago in a very middle-class family. Both of my parents were school teachers. I had 3 older sisters. And when I went to college, my mom banned me from starting any other makeshift restaurants in my grandmother's house for many years. And I decided I was going to start a boat wash and wax business in a town called New Buffalo, Michigan. It's a town about an hour and a half outside of Chicago, and it's where all the rich people would go on the weekends, and they had these beautiful boats. So being the salesman, I went up there with my buddy, and we started talking to all these boat owners, going from one boat to the next. And sure enough, we got all these clients, and we were washing and waxing their boats all summer. And it was such a good job. I did such a good job of selling, I decided the next summer we were going to do it again. And this summer I learned probably one of the most valuable lessons I could have ever learned in my life. And it came through an unexpected turn. I decided to create a new program. We're sales and marketing people. I said, let's create a program that if they hire us to wash their boat each week, when they sign up for the whole summer, we'll incentivize them and we'll give them 3 free waxes throughout the summer. And my buddy and I thought it was a great idea. So I went down to the local printer and I printed these beautiful neon orange flyers with big black lettering, and I went from boat to boat to boat, putting a flyer on every single boat in that New Buffalo harbor. And just as I'd put the last flyer on the last boat, this major storm came barreling in the harbor. The heavens got dark and buckets of rain started coming down, and it was a brief storm that only lasted about an hour. And after the storm passed, I went out and I started looking at some of the boats, and I realized that something wasn't right. You see, the printer failed to mention that neon orange ink, when it got wet, it would bleed. Well, these weren't $10,000 little skiffs. These were big boats. And I was freaking out, and I immediately ran back to the little place where we were staying, and I called up my cousin who was in his first year of law school at John Marshall, because that was the only legal advice I could afford at the time. And then I went to the local hardware store, and I bought every pair of cleaning agents you could imagine. Soft scrub with bleach and simple green. And my buddy and I, we worked for 24 hours around the clock, scrubbing each and every one of those boats that we put those flyers on. And we made sure that we took responsibility for our actions. And all of our buddies thought for sure we were going to go out of business. They thought, no one is ever going to want to do business with you guys again. Word is going to get out what had happened. And they were right. Word did get out, and people found out what had happened, but believe it or not, our business grew by 30% that year because people knew that mistakes happen in life, but we were old enough as 18, 19, 20-year-old guys to own up and take responsibility for what had happened. And that's a trait that I think most people go through life and they don't have. Most people go through life, and when there's a problem that arises, they point to their right and they point to their left, and they blame the person on either side of them. The successful ones are the ones who take the finger and they point at themselves and they own up to it. And that's something that I think is a very valuable lesson. And again, everywhere I go, I see a lot of people blaming everyone else for their lack of success or for their failures in the marriage or for everything that goes wrong in their lives. So I continued my quest as a salesman when I got out of college, and I decided I wanted to start another business. And I started searching and networking and talking to everyone I knew. And I'll never forget the first business that I looked at because it was almost my last. My buddy called me up and he said, Bill, I've got a friend of a friend on the west side of Chicago, and he's looking to relocate, and he's selling this bar. And I think it could be a gold mine. I said, great. Set up an appointment for me on Saturday. I can't wait to see this place. So Saturday morning comes, and I get in my car, and I'm driving over to this bar on the west side of Chicago, and as I'm driving over to the bar, I'm envisioning myself as the next Sam Malone from Cheers. Those kids from Purdue had no idea who the hell Sam Malone was. And I'm thinking, this is going to be a great place. You know, people are going to come and hang out. It's going to be a real moneymaker. And I pull into the parking lot of this bar, and as I pull into the parking lot, it immediately dawns on me that something isn't right. See, my friend had only given me the address. He never mentioned the name, and I didn't think anything of it at the time. And I see the name of the bar right above the door in big letters, and the name of this bar was The Aftermath. I didn't know what it was, but I open up the door, and I meet the owner of The Aftermath, and this guy puts his arm around me, and he was the fastest talking salesman I'd ever met. And he's telling me how I'm going to be a millionaire if I buy this place, and it's such a gold mine. And as I take a few more steps in, I look around, and I realize that The Aftermath was no ordinary bar. The Aftermath was a bondage bar. I'd never been in one of these places before. I swear to God, I'm looking at these different contraptions and racking devices that they have, and I'm thinking, how am I going to get out of this? So I had to give him the courtesy of a walkthrough. And he's walking me through the place, and he takes me, he's like, Bill, you're going to love this. This here is the real moneymaker in the operation. And it was the room that he called the dungeon room. And as I'm walking through the dungeon room, I couldn't help but think, I really want to be involved in a business where my family can help me. And I don't think my 65-year-old mother's going to want to work the dungeon room at 4 in the morning on a Saturday. But I kept searching and searching, and I was finally 6 or 7 months into my search, and I was sitting at this outdoor cafe, and these 3 European gentlemen sat down at the table next to me, and they pulled out the biggest cigars I'd ever seen. And they were smelling these cigars, and the way they were lighting these cigars, this idea hit me like a bolt of lightning. I'm going to create the first ever Cigar of the Month Club. No one had ever done this. I'll send out 5 cigars to people's homes. I'll generate a newsletter to educate them on the products that I'm sending them. And I thought people may want to give this as a gift, so I'll put a little gift card in there as well. I left the cafe, and I went over to my buddy John's house, and I pitched my buddy John on the idea, and we decided we were going to do this. We were going to become partners. And we moved our command center into my buddy's 400-square-foot studio apartment. It's about half the size of the stage that I'm standing on. And I got some used desks and some used computers, and I got 7 or 8 1-800 phone lines piped in. Now, my buddy was more of the accounting, finance guy. I was the sales and marketer. So the pressure was on me to get this thing up and running, to get these phones ringing. And we had no money. And I thought to myself, I'm an innovator. You know, part of sales and marketing is problem solving. What am I going to do to get these phones to ring? I can't buy an advertising campaign because we don't have the money. I can't buy billboards or any of that stuff. So I decided to try something a little bit different. I sat down at that used computer that I got from my brother-in-law, and I typed a letter explaining how this Cigar of the Month Club works. And at the end of the letter, I asked for help. And I took the letter and I put it inside of an envelope, and then I took the envelope and I put it inside of a box because I knew a box would always get opened before an envelope. And I put some cigars on top of that box. And then I went to the local costume shop in the neighborhood, and I bought a pair of these thick Coke bottle nerd glasses that you might wear on Halloween. And I taped a little note right on the bridge of those glasses. And the note read, "Please take a closer look at my business idea." And I put those glasses on top of the cigars that were on top of that envelope, and I sealed this box up. And I made 10 of them. And I sent them out to the top 10 morning radio shows in Chicago. And about a week after I sent those boxes out, I'll never forget the day, I got a call from the producer of the #1 morning drive radio show. It was the Jonathan Brandmeier morning radio show. And this producer called me up and she said, "I'm going to let you come on to sell your products. You got 5 minutes." She said, "Make your 5 minutes count." And everyone in this room, I hope, knows the value of 5 minutes. And I go to the radio station the day that I'm supposed to, and I meet this Jonathan Brandmeier character, and we hit it off instantly. And my 5 minutes turned into 35 minutes at the heart of morning rush hour, and he's telling his listeners how he's been a member of this Cigar of the Month Club for years. I just kind of kept quiet. I know the attorney who was just speaking probably wouldn't agree with that. Just kept my mouth shut and looked down at my shoes. He'd given it to all of his relatives for the holidays, and they loved it. He was going on and on and on. But he was a brilliant marketer because he kept giving out my 1-800 number every 15 or 20 seconds. So I finished the interview, and I ran out of the John Hancock Tower, which is where these studios were, and there was a huge radiology, how I remember this I don't know, but there was a huge radiology convention going on, and I couldn't get a cab to save my life in the city. So I have to sprint back to the little apartment where our office was. It was I guess about 3/4 of a mile, and